All right. Hello, everybody. We are back with another talk. We have Robert with us today, who is going to be giving us a talk, a Netrunner's Guide to CS. And so Robert, I believe, is a third-year student at Carleton. And I've worked with him quite a lot in sort of the security field, doing hacking competitions, and it's different than hackathons. We're talking like capture the flag competitions and security events like that. And so Robert's bringing a lot of knowledge from different places in computer science. And I will pass it over to you, Robert.
All right, thanks, Forrest. So, welcome to a Netrunner's Guide to CS, tools, credits, and more to build skills and live in a digital world without breaking the bank. So a little bit about me. My name is Robert. I'm a third-year Bachelor of Computer Science in the Computer and Internet Security stream. I'm also a penetration tester at Software Secured, working part-time and then also going into a co-op in the summer. I'm also an international CTF player. This picture of me was from the Hard Rock Cafe in Prague. That was the ECSC 2021. Very fun event, and that was a result of the CyberSci competition. And I'm also the VP of events for the Carleton Cybersecurity Club. So a lot of security in my portfolio. So what's this about? So university, as a lot of people know it, is like a place to learn stuff. I also happen to think about it as a bit of a skill builder. So university is a really good opportunity to build skills, and you have access to a lot of resources to help you do this. So you have access to courses, professors, clubs, infrastructures, and a lot of credits and discounts you get just for being a student. Now, the problem with this, some of these things fly under the radar. Like some of them are a little bit more obvious, like you get Microsoft Word for free as a student, but a lot of them, some people just flat out don't know about. The GitHub Student Developer Pack is a great example of this. I've known multiple people that really have not heard of this until like later in their career. So you get a lot of stuff, cloud credits, various tools and subscriptions. You also get domains for free, which is really, really handy in your early years of CS. You also get cloud credits in general that are outside the GitHub Student Developer Pack. And then there's also some open source software that you might not be aware of, but would also really help kind of boost your productivity without sort of tying you to closed source software and stuff that might make you pay for. So multimedia, security, and productivity, those are all fields that I'm going to be talking about. So if you remember only one thing from this presentation, it's the fact that in the digital world, chances are there's an open source version or a credit for what you want to use. I'll say that again. In the digital world, chances are there's an open source version or a credit for what you want to use. So first, let's talk about the GitHub Student Developer Pack. This you get access to by connecting your university email to your GitHub account. And a lot of CS students don't actually know about this. I was talking to a guy who I was in the Hatch cohort with, and he was telling me that, oh, I'm paying for GitHub Pro. And I told him, like, well, GitHub actually offers you that for free as part of the GitHub Student Dev Pack. And he was almost graduated. So he'd spent like 4 or 5 years in computer science, and he still didn't know about this pack, and which is really unfortunate because it offers you a lot of great stuff. So let's talk about cloud credits first. So you get 2 platforms at $100 each, plus a couple of additional services. So Microsoft Azure, that is the second most popular cloud provider in the world right now. You get virtual servers and a bunch of other dev tools as well. So stuff like machine learning, databases, web applications. So if you want to take advantage of the machine learning tactics that you learned from the Intro to AI lecture, then you can definitely implement those in Azure. DigitalOcean is another great service. It's something that I've looked into using personally. It's more app focused, and it provides a focus on getting services up and running. So like inexpensive virtual private servers, and also Kubernetes is really well done in this one. So if like IT and DevOps is your field, that's what you're looking at. So this obviously begs the question of why use cloud. It's really super in demand. Companies like all over, especially with the advent of the pandemic, more and more companies are moving into more of an online space, and the require in order to facilitate that, you need to have cloud platforms because a lot of companies don't have their own servers. It also allows you to show off projects really, really easily. You just fire up a server, clone your code into there, and away you go. It also gives you some hands-on practice with setting up servers. So if you go into a little bit more manually, you can get some practice with security protocols, setting up SSH keys, ports, all that fun stuff. And the DevOps market is also really big right now. So if you can get your hands on some Kubernetes practice, that'll go a long way. And then there's also stuff like Docker and a whole bunch of other stuff. And also Azure, like I said earlier, is the second most popular cloud provider. But what about AWS and Google Cloud Platform? Like those are like the first and third. Like why aren't there credits for those? And we'll talk about those in a bit. So let's talk about tools and subscriptions. So these are just a few of the tools that I found particularly interesting. So for the artistic among you, Canva gives you 12 months of pro with the GitHub Student Developer Pack. So that's really handy if you're in more of like a multimedia course. JetBrains, you get a free annual subscriptions for students. So this gives you access to like 16 products for free, which is really awesome. Termius is more of like DevOps IT type of deal. And that's actually an SSH client that syncs your data. So the more you get into IT, the more SSH keys you're going to have, which are basically like authentication systems for servers. So that's actually really handy in syncing your data there. MongoDB, for those of you that are in web development, you're fairly familiar with this, but it's basically a database that's JSON based. So you also get $50 credit to Atlas, and then you also get a free certification that's valued at $150. So if that's what you want to go for, it's there. Testmail.app, that gives you a free essential plan while you're a student, really handy for testing email signups, all sorts of stuff. And then you also have tons of course sites and educational content, as is expected with a student dev pack. Now, let's talk about domains. So really, the thing about domains, no one's going to remember 141.125.23.62. I have not memorized that IP to this day. They're also not going to remember potato salad 1487.herokuapp.com, which is like a default domain that you get with a Heroku project, right? They're going to remember a domain. For instance, the domain that I own, robertbabayev.tech, that's the stuff that I use for my website in particular. And you can visit it right now. It's up. So, domain provider, and the reason why I'm talking about this is because having a domain and having a website will help you stand out from the crowd, and it'll also give you a place to show off your projects that isn't just your resume. Plus, it'll also demonstrate web development skills and all that fun stuff. So, different domain providers that the GitHub Student Developer Packs provides. You get a year of the domain plus SSL, which is really nice. So that's basically the HTTP. SSL is basically HTTPS and how that gets secured. So Namecheap, .tech and name.com are 3 providers that give you these domains for free, and also a couple of other goodies, but the main thing is the domain and the SSL that they give you. GitHub. So you get GitHub pages for free with the GitHub Student Developer Pack. You can put that domain to use, and also it also gives you some static website hosting. So if you're not using any your domain for anything in particular, you just want a static website, GitHub Pages will help you get that up and running without needing to worry about like worker nodes and all that stuff. You also get GitHub Pro. This might be a little bit more advanced, but you do get 3,000 minutes of GitHub Actions, which is really nice for building and testing your code before it actually goes into production. So if you're on a larger project, that's something you definitely want to look into. You also get open source security measures, so stuff like required reviewers. That's really handy for code review. And then also you get stuff like wikis, which is really handy if you want to give a bit more documentation as to your project without having to link to an external website. Let's talk cloud. I'm getting a couple of messages. Oh, no, that's just something else. So let's talk cloud. Cloud credits. So this is something I talked about in the beginning. And you actually get a number of these credits for being a student, not necessarily through the GitHub Student Developer Pack, but AWS was actually on the student pack before they got acquired by Microsoft, so that dropped off. So you get $75 to $200 for being for just having an academic email, and Carleton students actually get $200 of AWS credit, which is insane. You also get Google Cloud. That gives you $300 for 90 days for new users. So that's anyone. You don't even need an academic email. So it's really handy if you just need to fire up a server for a few months and then just completely forget about it. Linode. So this one's actually an interesting one. You actually get $100 to sign up with select YouTube sponsorships. And I actually found this while looking at You Need to Learn Kubernetes Right Now from Network Chuck. I figured, you know what? Like the video is a few months old. Let's just try the credit to see if it works, and it worked. So so lesson there. Even if a video is really old, just try the credit just to see if it works. And then also Oracle does give you $300 for 30 days. Not as good, but it is still there. And now also you're also going to want to research the limitations of these credits because they do have certain factors. Like AWS Educate, you do have the requirement of being a student. Google Cloud, Oracle, you do have a bit of a time limit on there. So that's important to keep in mind. Who likes Minecraft? So this was something I was researching actually when I was looking into Minecraft servers, and I didn't really want to pay like Apex hosting for to get a Minecraft server up and running. So I'm like, okay, Oracle Cloud is actually free, and you actually get an ARM server with up to 6 CPUs and 24 gigabytes of RAM per instance. Last time I checked, and that's on the free tier. So you're able to actually get a pretty solid Minecraft server up and running for no cost. And from what I can, and like as far as I can tell, that's free forever. So now obviously, why would you want to set up a Minecraft server? That's kind of like, I mean, it's a game, you know. There's actually a lot more to that than you might think. First of all, you're on a Linux server, so you're automatically learning the command line just by setting it up, getting the server jar file onto your machine. That's learning the Linux server. Moving around, manipulating the configuration. That's learning the Linux command line. You also learn a little bit about networking. So you have to SSH into your server. You learn a little bit about how Minecraft IPs and ports work. You also this is more of like a community thing, but if you're working on a server with a lot of friends or a lot of people, or even just a public server, this also teaches you a little bit about community administration as one of the more soft skills that you can build. As you know, it's one of the more soft skills that are actually really handy to have in tech, because the thing you have to remember, technology as a field is not only about your hard skills, it's also about how well you can work with people. So having an ability to have those skills is really handy. And also it teaches you a little bit about security. Minecraft whitelists are a thing that exists, and people can connect to your server from pretty much anywhere in the world if they can find it on Shodan. I would talk about that more in depth, but basically all you need to know is that Shodan is a search engine that allows you to search different devices over the internet. SES infrastructure. This is a great time. So you have a bunch of OpenStack VMs that are free to Carleton students. This is a great way to host open source projects. This is spearheaded by my friend Forrest, who is absolutely amazing in the stuff that he does for the SES. The only caveat to your project is that it must be publicly available, and you also have to have an SES account, which is pretty easy. But you also get some really beefy VMs, up to 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM. I wish I was joking. That's actually one of the image sizes that I've seen. Obviously, reserve these for like really, really intense websites that are like you think are going to get like high traffic. And obviously, don't try to use these for Minecraft server. You know, like it's a it's a little bit overkill. So last thing, let's talk a little bit about open source. So you might be asking, why would I go into open source? Open source software is actually free far more often than that. Not. And if you know anything about technology, is that there is a lot of paid software out there. That's like the first thing you see on Google. So having open source alternatives is really, really nice. The code is also free to view, and this might not make a whole lot of sense until you realize that you can check that it's to see if it's malicious before you download it. Now, oftentimes, if you're in first or second year, you might not even know what's malicious and what isn't, and that's not your fault. Like that's literally like even sometimes I don't even know if something is really malicious before I download it. But the thing is, everyone can see it. So if someone is able to actually see, hey, this is not good, or this is a vulnerability, or this is actually malicious, they will make that known. Um, you also don't get the mess of dealing with trial version software. Um, this is this is often an interesting caveat because sometimes trial version software kind of gets you because you look up free XYZ software online, right? And then you're hit with a trial version and you're like, what the heck? So open source software kind of avoids that because 9 times out of 10 you don't the software is free to begin with, so there's no idea of a trial. And also the last thing, contributing. So you can actually contribute to open source. Um, and if you like a project, you can fix some bugs or add some features if you have the skill, or even just contributes to some of the documentation. It is also a good way of demonstrating your skills and even starting your own project. Um, and that way you're able to actually build up your own portfolio because you're able to say like, hey, I contributed to this, and you actually have commit history to prove that you did. Especially if your pull request gets approved, that's a really, really good feeling. It also demonstrates initiative and collaboration because you're going out and saying, "Hey, I want to fix this," and then you're also oftentimes you're working with other people to fix that issue. Um, Oftentimes it's just through like GitHub issues and talking through text through pull requests, but that sort of collaboration is very valuable to have. So a couple of tips for finding solid open source. Um, Search for open source and not free stuff. This might seem weird, but if you search for free stuff, you run the risk of running into malware or running into trial versions. So searching for open source stuff um, is definitely the best way of going about this. Also, ideally, you want to have something that's recently maintained, hopefully within the last year, and that just shows that if you have a bug in the system, that it's going to be fixed relatively quickly. Also, the more stars, the better. So GitHub stars are kind of like a method of measuring popularity, similar to like YouTube subscribers or TikTok followers. Um, and just as a kind of like a benchmark, one of the most popular libraries on GitHub right now is React, and has 171,000 stars. So if something like React has about 171,000, then something that's about 1,000 is still like pretty good. That's like comparing T Series to, I don't know, somebody with like 1 million subscribers, just kind of give the comparison there. And then also do some research. So figure out if anybody else has used the app. If you're the only one using something, it's probably not a good sign. And then also see if it appears in any articles, and then see what other people are saying about it. So there are three topics of open source software that I want to discuss: media editing, code editing, and then security. Um, so media editing. Now, Adobe and Microsoft, they really have a solid grasp on the professional industry, but as far as just editing stuff for yourself or for like a small group of friends or for school, you really don't need Adobe and Microsoft software. This is just a list of all of the open source or all of the free slash open source software. DaVinci Resolve is I'm still trying to figure out if that one's actually open source, but the rest of the software is actually open source. LibreOffice, OBS, Inkscape, Audacity, and GIMP. You might want to be careful with Audacity because that was recently sold out to a Russian company, so just be careful about whatever data you might want to put out there. And then also, obviously, if you can find other alternatives that work just as well, you're go nuts, honestly. So DaVinci Resolve, that's a really good video editor. GIMP is a photo editor. Audacity. It's pretty self-explanatory stuff. Also for the LibreOffice stuff, so you get documents, presentations, and spreadsheets. You also get basically the entire Microsoft Office suite. I think they even have a database client like Access, so that's really nice as well. Let's talk about code editing. This is probably going to be a very short section because I don't really know enough of the differences about VS Code versus Atom to really recommend one over the other. But with VS Code, you do get an integrated terminal. You get some pretty advanced debugging as well. So this is stuff like if you have like a Django project, that is really hard to debug normally. So being able to have like that sort of those sort of debugging settings built in is really handy. You also get it's more of an IDE than a code editor. So it really focuses on like the extensions and those extensions are actually really performant. And then also you have VS Live Share. I've used this on a number of occasions. Most recently, I used it at GeekPeak to work on Profit Zero, and that's really handy because you're able to kind of see each other's code in real time, and then also execute something on the host machine, which make sure you trust whoever you're doing this with, obviously, because that is in a way giving you control over their computer to an extent. So do be careful about that. But other than that, it's a great feature for collaboration. Atom, this is definitely more of a lightweight editor. And the more extensions you add, the heavier it gets and the slower it gets, at least according to what I've read. It's more of a text or code editor than an IDE, so it's nice if you just need to like edit a text file and you don't need to wait for any like extensions or nothing to set up. So it's really handy for that. So honestly, try both, honestly, and then see what feels right to you. There are also multiple language specific editors. I just chose to highlight these because they are pretty general purpose and they'll get you wherever you need to go. Let's talk about security, my favorite subject. So first things first, you actually need a password manager in CS. Passwords are getting easier and easier to crack, and having a good password, usually without a password manager, means it's hard to remember. Now, one thing password managers kind of solve this problem, and I talked about this in a talk I gave earlier called "Your Password Sucks." And but the gist of it is that a password manager, you have one really strong password that manages all of your other passwords, so you don't even have to think twice, and you can just autofill. Now, Dashlane is really popular for sponsorships, and it's gotten a lot of publicity. The only thing is, it's closed source software with $40 a year for the premium version. And the trial version is really limiting. You only get 50 passwords on one device and no synchronization. So that's fine if you really don't have as many accounts. But if you're in computer science, like I was able to get to the 50 password limit really quickly with the amount of accounts that you have on a regular basis. Like you definitely need something more substantial, and this is where the open source options come in. Bitwarden, KeePass X, and Sono. So Bitwarden is actually what I personally use. It's really powerful. It's feature rich. Like you have two-factor authentication, secure sending for messages, secure notes, all this sort of fun stuff. And it's also got a really wide reach. It's available on pretty much every platform and every browser that you can think of. KeePass is definitely a more mature and reliable software. It's been around since like 2003, so it's definitely good software. It's also fairly extensible. The only thing about it is it's Windows only. There is an unofficial Linux fork, but if you're gonna look into that, look into something like KeePass X, which is a cross-platform fork of KeePass, and then that will get you where you want to go. There's also Sono, which I haven't dug too far into, but it does exist, and it's more of like a team-oriented web-based platform. So if you have like the infrastructure to host a web server, that's a great way to go if you need something for your team. Also, quick tip for password managers: use a master pass sentence instead of a master password. Unfortunately, I don't have time to actually go into what makes a good password, but there are plenty of articles and whatnot online that will help you get that. And really, the thing you want to keep in mind is that when you only have one password, you better make sure that password is really secure. Now, some of these password managers can be scary. For Bitwarden in particular, you really can't lose that master password because you have no way of recovering it. One way to kind of mitigate that is to have settings to enter your password frequently. Like on the browser extension, you can set your session to expire every 15 minutes, so you just have to re-enter your password every 15 minutes, and that keeps it really fresh in your mind. And you also have to remember that one password manages everything. So if you can remember just one really strong password, then you're pretty much set. Let's talk about authenticators. Two-factor authentication is really crucial, especially with the amount of data breaches and phishing that is going around everywhere. So um, one thing about two-factor authentication is basically if your password gets compromised, then you'll also have an extra layer of defense because they would also have to compromise your second authentication method. And that's kind of just adds an extra layer of security. Now, SMS is the kind that most platforms offer, but it's not great. It's vulnerable to SIM hijacking, which is basically like an attacker stealing your SIM card in a way. And although sometimes it's the only thing available, so it's kind of what you have to go through. Authenticator apps are actually the next best thing. So these are stuff. This is stuff like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, and Twilio Authy. And they're integratable with pretty much with a lot of different. They're integratable with a lot of different programs and software that you might have. But the obvious problem is these are closed source and known by large companies. So an open source alternative is actually Privacy ID, and these guys have been around for years. They have 1.2 thousand stars on GitHub, and they're actually really solid software. I primarily just use Twilio Authy because I haven't actually made the swap, but from my research, this is like they know their stuff. They have a bunch of different products, and you can read more on their website. Last but not least, file encryption, or actually second last but not least, file encryption. So you probably have at least one file you don't want other people to see, whether that's sensitive documents or just stuff that you want to keep more on the down low. And Windows encryption is not very accessible, at least not on Windows 10. There's stuff like BitLocker for Windows 7 and 8, but I don't find that's very accessible on most people's editions of Windows. It does come by default on Linux, and Mac is kind of a bit of a variable. I don't have a whole lot of experience with that. But the typical options you can kind of select to get around this is stuff like NordLock or EncryptForge, which encrypt your files on your computer and just store them more securely. Now, obviously, those services do have price tags attached to them. So there are more open source options. So Veracrypt is the one that I actually use. This one's cross-platform. You also get hidden volumes and nested encryption with this, and if you actually go through the software, it is really nice. They use mouse movements for their RNG, and then yeah, it's really solid software. So the concept of a hidden volume is basically in case your main password gets compromised, then you'll actually still have like another hidden volume that you can use to store really sensitive files, and they can't prove it's there. So it's really nice. You also have new Privacy Guard, which allows you to kind of like remotely back up your files, and it's an implementation of the PG pre-encryption method, which is pretty solid encryption. I'd personally go with Veracrypt, but if you want to try and play around with a new Privacy Guard, go for it. And lastly, let's talk about Cloudflare. So you remember those domains from the student dev pack? Once the SSL expires, it actually gets really expensive. So Cloudflare actually has free SSL and domain migration. So you can grab your domain off whatever website and then fire it off to Cloudflare. And then that'll get you actually some really nice features as well. DDoS mitigation, so being able to protect against denial of service attacks. You also have a really easy DNS and a universal SSL cert, like I mentioned earlier. DNS is basically mapping domain names to IP addresses, so it's really easy to use. And so the last point I want to make, basically, don't spend money on stuff you don't have to. Like I mentioned, in the digital world, there is probably an open source version or a credit for what you want to use. And that is it. A bit of a speed run talk, but thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, my Discord handle is at the bottom there, and I also put in my contact page on my website if you want to contact me after this. So that's it.
Awesome, good stuff. This was super cool, Robert. A ton of information in there. What I'd recommend is maybe if you can add your slides to like maybe a PDF or something and make that available on the Discord, that could be helpful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I
We have like a
will.
lot of content that's on there. That's super useful to know. Um, so we have like time for one question, I think. One I wanted to go over is someone asked, I feel like something that is open sourced and used enough can't really be malicious. Otherwise, it wouldn't be known as such. And so I was sort of like, I mean, I read that I thought 0 days. And if you have any comments on that as well, that could be cool.
Yeah. So the thing about the thing about being malicious versus being vulnerable is really a key difference to know. Just because something is not malicious doesn't mean it isn't vulnerable. Um, and although the thing is, and if it's open source and used enough that it can't be really malicious, like that's pretty true. Like there, like a lot of people, like there's a story of like somebody that tried to get malicious code into the Linux kernel and they got like banned from a university or something, right? So yeah, it's really difficult to have a malicious product that's also really popular because people are going to find out, right? Like they managed to find out like the whole stuff about about TikTok with the reverse engineering. So people are going to find out this sort of stuff. Vulnerabilities are a bit of another matter. It's really difficult to figure out every vulnerability before you deploy an application. So that's why you want to rely on like penetration testing and source code review to actually catch those vulnerabilities. So having a solid security platform and also being secure in your design from the beginning, it adds a lot. So my recommendation is like there's only really so much you can do to protect yourself. And a lot of the time, if software doesn't counter a 0 day, well, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do, but hope that it gets patched quickly. Um, like I said, though, 0 days also happen to closed source software as well. So there's kind of it's kind of the same on both sides, really.
Awesome. And I'm going to cut it off right there just so we can head over to the next topic here. So we're back almost right away with the next talk, your first data science competition. And we'll see you there. Thank you so much, Robert.